coach bounced over the rough road, and Portia Gadstone folded up the advert she had clipped from the newspaper and slipped it back into her reticule. Turning her attention to the bleak countryside, she reflected that it wasn't nearly as bleak as her life. Her life was in shambles, she was penniless, and she had nowhere else to turn. As they rounded a curve, she saw the monstrous building, black as Satan's soul, with towers, turrets, and spires, reaching for the heavens, looming before her, growing larger each time the horse's hooves hit the ground. It could be no other than Havisham Hall. A chill skittered down her spine, if she had any other choice. Only she didn't. Hello, and welcome to a very spooky edition of Tea and Strumpets, a Regency romance review. I'm Zoe.
And I'm Kelsey.
So, Kelsey, this week we have our first, actually?
Yeah, we're real time. People want to correct us.
Yes, and actually we love that a couple of people did reach out to let us know about this correction, and we really appreciate it. We kind of had a feeling maybe we bungled this one.
Yeah, I also had my friend Kristen directly text me this. So Kristen, what up? Because I know you're listening.
Yes, and thank you. And so we did pronounce, I think we pronounced it two different ways, but we pronounced pugilist wrong, which then we were corrected and told that it is pugilist, not pugliest. So,
although Kristen pointed out that she was not unhappy to imagine a pug in boxing shorts.
So, yeah, now I'm also not unhappy.
Future merch idea. Don't take it.
Yeah. TM. Okay. But rather than do our regular question today, I thought this was the perfect time to return back to our discussion on the Duke and I, because we actually did have quite a few responses from you guys, and we were really happy about that. We did want to continue this conversation, and so we would like to share a couple with you and talk about it a little bit more today.
Yes, absolutely. We knew this was a conversation starter. We even had our own conversations about it while discussing it for you guys as well. So we are happy to get your responses and glad that we could start this conversation.
So the first that we have is from listener Becca, and thanks again, Becca, for writing in. We really do appreciate it. The other thing I'm going to say is I am paraphrasing here and there. I'm not reading her whole email because it was quite long, but I'm trying to make sure that I get all the important points in there. So I'm going to cut in about a sentence or two after she starts, but she is saying, if your definition of rape means sex acts that occur after the point of unwillingness, Daphne refusing to stop when she bore down and hung on, even though it was clear that coming in her was not what Simon wanted, by your own definition, that encounter became a rape. I feel like the idea that it could have not been rape because Simon was initially into it is the same argument that is made in sex assault/rape cases where the argument is that the woman was initially into it and she said yes initially, even if she changes her mind, so it wasn't rape. So I think that in the episode, Kelsey, you and I kind of wrestled with that and our thoughts. And before the episode and after the episode too, I even went and did a little bit more research on what the legal definition of rape was, because I was curious. I don't think that I am judge and jury for Daphne. I mean, a little bit here. We're talking about it critically, right? But I just wanted to know, we're reading this book in 2019. So in 2019, would it have been considered rape? I'm also not a lawyer. But it seemed to me from my research that based on all of the evidence, my gut was that she would have been prosecuted with sexual assault, but that a rape charge wouldn't have stuck. Again, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a professional researcher, but that was kind of why I also had that opinion. I don't know. Kelsey, do you have some thoughts there?
I think it's, the same, that it would more border to the lines of sexual assault versus rape for a few other reasons, but that's not discounting that. And I think that it's all a gray area. And so where the definition is and where the line is hard. Like, it's all bad. We're not arguing if it's good or bad. We're just trying to argue what it would technically the clinical term for it would be. But I think that also Becca brings up a really good point. Further in her email, she states, "What does consent mean when one party is impaired? I feel like the impulse to try and redeem or understand Daphne's actions mirrors the larger societal tendency to try and justify or write off the behavior of men who take advantage of women who are drunk. I think I'm a lot harsher on Daphne than you are." And, you know, for our own personal reasons, our own personal understandings, our own personal experiences in situations similar to this, I think that would allow us to be a harsher judge of Daphne or not. However, I think that it's a lot of like personal understanding. So really what is the case? And it is such a hard thing when one party is impaired, because where does the line of consent actually start?
And we're talking, you know, the 1800s here, but I think that now we want better, and we want it to not be gray. We want it to be clearer. We want it to be that consent is consent, and yes is yes and no is no, and that it shouldn't have to be such a complicated thing. And I think that that's good that we as a society are pushing towards that, and it's going to take a while to get there, but I feel some hope coming from the younger generations. You and I are both millennials, Kelsey, and I feel like, you know, the Gen Z and Gen X, is that what they are? They're giving us
no idea.
Okay, well, the younger folks, the youths, are giving us some hope. So hopefully they will continue to make us better. But I also like how she finished up, which she said, "I don't think this book aged well in this regard, but at the same time, I think it provides an excellent starting point for a discussion about how we think of consent, alcohol, and rape, particularly when gender roles are reversed, and it is the woman engaging in ethically dubious, to put it mildly, behavior." And I completely agree. I think that it is still an open conversation. And I think it's just clear that you're totally right here in the fact that you're a lot harsher on Daphne than we are. We are tending to forgive her more for whatever our reasons are.
I think, though, for at least in my personal opinion, I think that this book actually does age well in that sense, because this is the conversation we're having today, and this book brings up that conversation. It's an issue that we can talk about to this day, whereas maybe earlier it was just brushed across. Like, people skip by it. Rereading it, we now look at it and we're like, oh, this is something we should be talking about. So in that respect, I think this book is aging well in the sense that it's a conversation starter.
But we had another listener who had a bit of a different viewpoint as well, who wrote in. So this is listener Lark, and she has a blog called The Bookworm's Hoard. And so I'm going to read what she had to say. She said, and again, this is a little bit paraphrased because we have really prolific writers and very passionate listeners. So thank you guys so much for writing. But I hope you don't mind that I'm paring it down just a little bit. So she says, "I had the same issues with the Duke and I that you did, and for the same reasons. The consent issues, the problems with Daphne's character make it only one of the first 6 books that I usually skip whenever I reread them. On a whole, I agree with your analysis of the book of the main and secondary characters. But one thing that struck me as missing in your analysis of Daphne is the effect of growing up as a girl with 3 older brothers in an era when what girls and women could do was sharply curtailed. I think her strength comes largely from that experience, from contending with her brothers, from the combination of support, overprotectiveness, and competition that defies their relationship with her. But her manipulativeness comes from dealing with her brothers as well. As she grew up, she couldn't outmatch them physically, and she's both female and younger than they are, so she couldn't depend on the benefits of either age or gender in order to prevail in any conflict. It's not surprising that she learned to be manipulative. It would have been one of the few successful tactics available to her." And you're totally right, Lark. We did not think about that.
Phrased it beautifully.
Yeah. And when I read that sentence of yours there, I really started to think too about Becca's email. And I was like, why I don't judge Daphne so harshly? Because I don't have personal experience in a situation like that. So I don't have something personally to relate it to. So is that why I see her behavior as more manipulative than a flat out malicious thing towards Simon. I think there is that. And kind of like I said when we talked about it, Kelsey, I think we did discuss how so many times in the book she did something manipulative, and maybe we didn't label it as such, but she did something bad, and that bad behavior was rewarded by her getting what she wanted, which is manipulation.
She did have manipulative tendencies, but her mother did as well. And we see that throughout the book. And that was something we didn't like about Mrs. Bridgerton,
Ooh.
Even though that comes into play. And it's one of those things we first picked out. Like, I remember liking her, but I really don't like her now. But it is. Yeah. She's not stronger, taller, anything than her brothers. And so you could argue that about many women. Constantly, the social idea is that women are manipulative, but that's just, as I told you when you sent me this email to have me look at it, I was like, maybe that's just a societal thing, that women have this reputation of being manipulative, but really there's not a lot we can do to match with men physically. So then we just have to work sideways around it to get what we want.
And then that's seen as manipulative. But there have been lots of people who've said this better than us.
Yeah.
And one of those people that tie in, I think, perfectly here is actually Maya Rodale and Dangerous Books for Girls. Because when we were kind of thinking about this in context of after reading Dangerous Books for Girls and after talking to Maya, there was a whole chapter in Dangerous Books for Girls that we didn't really discuss at all, which was all about the Bodice Ripper and the history of the Bodice Ripper and how books of that genre and of that time were very heavy with rape. Actually, we did talk about it a little bit with The Flame and the Flower and how, you know, he was initially her aggressor and then they end up living happily ever after at the end. And neither of us have read that book, so we don't have a lot of context. However, there are some interesting points in Dangerous Books for Girls, which is talking about how women were exploring their sexuality. They weren't allowed to think about their sexuality. They weren't allowed to have these scandalous thoughts. They weren't allowed to like sex. And being forced to have sex, i.e. rape, in these books kind of allowed women to explore their sexuality in a different way than previously. So I think that there's something really interesting to be said that this book was written 19 years ago. And obviously reading it today, we as modern readers don't feel as comfortable with it. I think it's safe to say that. And I think that's a good thing. And I think that shows we're evolving again.
Yes. And I think that that's really what we're trying to do in this day and age is we're trying to open up the dialogue. We're not trying to shove it away and pretend it's not there. We're wanting to talk about it more. We want to really understand it. We want to have everybody's voice be heard.
And I think that we as readers are demanding more and better. And I think the authors are responding. I mean, we don't see that in Julia Quinn's writing anymore. You know, we don't see that. Her heroines are strong and feminist and fun and fierce and all the Fs that I can come up with. So, you know, that was a stepping stone. And I think it has provided a good conversation for now. And I still don't justify Daphne's behavior. It's not good. But I really love how much we've been able to talk about it. And I just want to thank our listeners again for reaching out to us because we really do appreciate your thoughts and we loved hearing your opinions. So keep them coming.
Yes. And we love having the dialogue between you all. We're happy to keep the dialogue going. So please, if you have anything else to say, let us know.
Absolutely. But we have a book that we're talking about today, and it's spooky.
We do. It's got some spoopiness to it, y'all. All right. Today we are talking about The Viscount and the Vixen by Lorraine Heath, which is number 3 in the Hellions of Havisham Hall series. So it is number 3, guys. So just if you like starting at the beginning, know that we started at the end this time around.
Yeah, and we did that because this one's a little bit spooky and we wanted to do a Halloween book. And I will say, though, that this is one of those series where by the time you get to number 3, you really don't learn a lot about 1 and 2. It's kind of a weird one in that respect. I've read the whole series. I don't think you have.
I have not. I found out. I thought I'd read this series. Turns out I hadn't. I got more and more into the book and I was like, I have not read this book. They do go ahead, though, and give you little snippets so you understand the other 2 Hellions that are brought in just for little snippets, and they give you a little background on the wives. So you don't feel like you've missed out from the first 2 books. Although for me, I'm like, dang it, now I need to go back and read the first 2 books.
I will say, though, Kelsey left out the best part, which is she was sure she'd read the Hellions of Havisham Hall series, but really she'd read the Hellions of Halstead Hall, I think, by Sabrina Jeffries.
I did. I read that book series. I love that series.
So I haven't read that one, so I don't know. The more Hellions, the merrier, I say.
All the Hellions are acceptable. Okay, so I have a quick author fact about Lorraine Heath. Turns out that she is very well written. Lorraine Heath is the author of more than 60 novels. She writes historical and contemporary romance for adults and historical romance for teen readers. Under the names Rachel Hawthorne and Jade Parker, she writes popular contemporary, historical, and paranormal romance for teen readers. She also writes young adult novels with her son under the name J.A. London.
That is so cool. I did not know any of these things. I don't know why. I'm like blown away by all of her pseudonyms.
I love it. I just saw this fact. I was like, there's my fact. I don't even need to go look for more.
Yeah. And we have a couple history facts this week. So the first I just want to point out is that this is our first book, which is not in the Regency. So we're much later. We're in the Victorian era. We're in like the 1880s. And just a quick thing, since we're stepping into the Victorian era for the first time. So the Victorian period is named because it is the period when Queen Victoria ruled. If you don't know,
what?
I know.
What?
If you don't know that that's how they name all the periods. So there was the Georgian era, which includes the Regency, and that came before this. And that's because there were a whole bunch of King Georges. And then after this, there's the Edwardian era because there was a King Edward. So,
well, what do you know?
And Queen Victoria was fascinating, huh?
Yeah, she was. So I found out that the Queen Victoria had a very strict upbringing and wasn't allowed to eat a lot as a child. So when she became queen, she vowed to make up for lost time. She ate incredibly quickly, which was a problem for her guests because they had to stop eating as soon as she finished a course, even if they hadn't actually finished it yet. And by the 1880s, she had a BMI of 32, which would make her obese by today's standards.
Good for her, man. I mean, if you're queen, you should get to do what you want.
I love eating all the food.
Live life to the fullest. And especially, that's really sad. I know she's one of those that definitely had a sad royal childhood. And she also had some interesting political opinions and such. But that's history for you. And we'll learn more about her as we go along.
Yes, we shall. We also have some pretty decent tropes for this one. We've got marriage of convenience, enemies to lovers. Although that's kind of like more, he doesn't like her and she's like, well, gotta marry someone. But we'll talk about that one.
They got a lot of secrets in this one, too.
Yes, there's secrets. So yeah, we've got quite a bit to, work through today with our main characters. Killian St. John, Viscount Locksley. He will be referred to as Locke for pretty much the remainder of the synopsis. And Miss Portia Gadsden.
I believe it's Mrs. That's my bad.
Oh, she's Mrs.
Yeah.
Or we think she is.
Yeah. Anyhow, shall we get into it?
We shall. So, little background since we're jumping into the third book of the series, as we found out. Killian St. John, Viscount Locksley, lives at Havisham Hall with his father, the Mad Marquess Marsden. And the house is a little spooky. His father believes that his mother is still roaming the moors, waiting for him to follow her. She died giving birth to Locke. So Locke's kind of got a chip on his shoulder. He thinks his dad kind of resented him because his dad was wallowing in grief for most of Locke's life.
And he also named him Killian. And so he harbors the feeling that because his name is Killian, he killed his mother. So anyhow, that's tangled.
Yeah. And because his father was wallowing in grief, he became a recluse. He does not leave Havisham Hall anymore. And the house has pretty much been a time capsule for when the Marchioness died. Linny is her name, so she's referred to as Linny by Marsden. And the clocks don't tick. All the clocks have been set to the time when Linny breathed her last breath. So literally no clocks work. There's no ticking. All the rooms are locked and closed, except for the rooms that are occupied by the current residents of the place. And his dad likes to gallivant across the moors once in a while.
Yeah, so he even has to lock his dad in his bedroom at night so that he doesn't wander the moors.
So it's a pretty spooky place to come visit.
They even refer to the staff, too, as a skeleton staff. There's only 3 of them there.
Yes, they literally have a cook, a housekeeper, and a butler. That's it. Nothing else.
For a really, really, really big house that used to be quite grand.
So life's going on as normal for father and son. Locke used to be known for his travels, but in the last couple years, he's pretty much just stayed at Havisham Hall. He hasn't even made it over to London. The previous Hellions, which were wards of his father, the Duke of Ashbury and the Earl of Grayling, they are no longer in residence, but they were for most of Locke's childhood, which was good because it meant Locke didn't live completely alone for his whole life.
Yeah, they came, I think, when he was 6 years old, and they were only about a year apart from each other. And the Earl of Grayling also had a twin brother, so there were in total 4 boys.
So anyway, life's going on as normal, and then all of a sudden his father's like up and dressed, and Locke's like, "What are you doing? What's happening here?" And his father announces that his bride is arriving today.
I thought this was pretty funny because they made a mention where the butler was like so proud that his father had decided to take a bath, and it wasn't even a Saturday.
Yeah. So like, it's a pretty big deal for the whole household that this man is not like his up and leaving the room. And Locke's just like, "Excuse me, WTF? Who's coming here today?"
Yeah. And so Locke, of course, the first thing he thinks is that his father's just misremembering that his mother is dead, which happens a lot in certain different ways. And he thinks that his father's getting worse. So at first he's just a little bit upset that his father is in a decline, but then his father turns it around.
Yeah, so it turns out he's been corresponding with Mrs. Portia Gadsden for quite a while. She answered an advert that he placed in the Times about looking for a wife, and they've been corresponding, so he knows everything he needs to know, and she's getting married to him today. The vicar's coming later.
So there's to be a wedding. And I think Locke is more shocked in this moment than he was when his father told him he was getting married and he thought it was his mother.
So right before she comes, Marsden's like, "Well, if you take a fancy to her, don't worry, I'll step aside and you can marry her instead." And Locke's like, "What is happening?"
Yeah, definitely not the morning he was intending.
No. So Portia is on her way to meet the Marquess and is running from something. We just don't know what it is at this point, but she's like, "I hope he doesn't find me. I took the mail coach because it's more inconspicuous." So she arrives at the manor and meets Locke because he's answered the front door instead of the butler. And she immediately treats him like a servant because that's who answers front doors at manors, right?
Yeah, and she is very highbrow with him and orders him about, tells him to go get her trunk and kind of pushes past him and is definitely putting on airs.
Yes, he does quickly say, "Oh, I'm the Viscount Locksley. Nice to meet you. I'm going to be your son, apparently." And she gets a little unnerved by that because he was not supposed to be in residence. They were supposed to be recluses together, her and the Marquess. What's the Viscount doing here?
And secretly, we find out in a few paragraphs that she had known the moment that Locke opened the door that it was Locke because she reads all the gossip sheets and knows exactly what he looks like. But she behaved how she thought aristocrats are supposed to behave.
So Locke 100% disagrees to her being here and would really like her to leave and never come back, except for the fact that Portia was smart and Marsden was being Marsden. And they had a contract written up, which basically stated that if she left without getting married that day and was not going to get married at all, he had to pay her £10,000.
Oof.
Which is a lot of money.
A lot of money.
And if they put off the marriage by even a day, it's £100.
Per day.
Per day. So pretty much someone's got to marry this girl. But Marsden wrote the contract in such a way that Locke could step in and marry her, and it would still be fine. That was the one thing Locke managed to gain out of the contract.
Yeah, he looks it over and realizes there's no way to get out of the money unless she cries off, so he tries that tactic next.
Yes, he leads her around the decrepit house that has not seen a cleaning staff in 30 years and is like, "Yep, this is how it is. We've got no servants. The rooms are all like this, and you better not touch them because my dad doesn't like that. Oh, and it's haunted."
Have I told you about my mother?
Yes. So Portia is not really deterred, but like instantly, and this is what we failed to mention to this point, instantly there's a sizzle. There's a sizzling between these two.
Mm-hmm.
And Portia's like, this is dangerous. This dude is dangerous. And of course, while he's touring the house, he kisses her in a very high-handed way.
Very high-handed.
And she just is like, I am undeterred by you. And actually, she gives a snappy retort, and she's like, I'm experienced, and screw you. And basically what comes is they come back from the tour. The vicar's now here. And Locke announces that he will marry Portia.
Yeah, he, throughout the tour, was kind of thinking to himself, like, well, what is this girl like? He doesn't want her to take advantage of his father. And he realizes, you know what? I can marry her. I always wanted to get married to a woman who I could never love because he had seen the madness of heartbreak affect his father so profoundly that he has vowed never to unlock his heart and love anyone. We should have said that as a trope.
Yes, we forgot that trope. So anyway, he has decided because she's just a conniving title seeker who is putting on airs that he'll marry her because he obviously could never love such a woman. And perfect for him.
But he could definitely sleep with her.
Oh, yeah. So they get married that afternoon.
And Portia does hesitate about the marriage, but we get a little bit of her internal dialogue where she's like, I don't want to do this. I don't have a choice. Fine. And basically what convinces her is he says some arrogant, bullheadish, shitty remark, and she's like, fine, I'll frickin' marry you.
Yeah, so as you can see, lots of love on both parties' part. They are ready for marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they get married that afternoon. They have a nice dinner with the Marquess and the vicar, and then they had Port alone since Marsden and the vicar left them to their own devices. There's a lot of sexy talk and some angry kissing, which ends with Locke carrying Portia up the stairs. Also, something to be said is they did come to an arrangement in this sexy talk that the days were hers, but the nights were his.
Oh, we've never heard this before.
Yes. And so she thinks it's just going to be immediate skirts over the head, plows into her, like completely just disregard for her completely because he's been such an arrogant ass the whole time. But he surprises her by the time they get to the bedroom. He starts to slow it down and he's actually kind of making it enjoyable for her and she's having some fun and she's not really looking at the deed as a duty. She can kind of get into it a bit.
Which actually scares her a little bit more because we can tell she's conflicted about this attraction that she has to Locke and also the idea that she might have something, a spark with him. She had so planned out in her head that she was going to be lying beneath or atop a shriveled old man and trying to give him an heir. But she didn't expect there to be any sort of fire like this. And it's really making her nervous for reasons that we as the reader don't understand.
Yes. However, this lovely sensual undressing is quickly interrupted by a shout, and Locke looks out the window to see his father making a mad dash across the moors. Hence, rumors of the Mad Marquess. So Locke goes to fetch his father, who is in his usual place in the moors, which is at Linny's grave. And his father is lamenting to the ether that he has done his duty by his wife. He's seen Locke married. Locke will have an heir. He can be with her now. She needs to come and get him because he's done what he had to do in this life. But so far she hasn't come and he's very upset because he tells Locke, she hasn't come for me. I could have sworn she would come for me today.
Yeah, it's very sad. I will say all of the scenes about the Marquess and his wife are quite heart-wrenching. So Locke takes the Marquess home, despite his protestations that he should be able to go with Linny now, but he just takes him home and locks him in his room. The Marquess does not fight him. He's just dejected. So after running after the Marquess, he is stinky and realizes now he needs to have a bath. So he goes up and sees Portia to tell her that, he needs to have a bath. This guy really likes to be clean. Let me tell you, there are so many baths in this book.
There's so many baths in this book. I was writing this down. She takes 2 a day in some cases.
It's a lot of baths. Anyhow, we'll maybe get into that in our discussion a little bit more. But so when Locke does tell Portia, he needs a bath, that she loves that idea. I mean, let's remember, she's been traveling many days by now, at least more than one. And so she loves the idea of a bath. And so Locke goes back down and starts filling the bath. But with all of the time that it takes to fill this giant tub and all of the logistics of running up and down the castle, by the time he returns to her with the tub ready, she has passed out. And let's be honest, he's a softie at heart and he cannot wake her up. So he returns to the bath himself, hoping that the water has cooled to also cool his lust.
Oh, yes. And the thing about this, I will also say that we are paraphrasing here, as there are a lot of pages of his lustful thoughts.
There's a lot of lustful thoughts. Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of them, and they take up pages. So the next morning, Portia wakes up and is shocked because she's in the bed. It's very clear he slept in the bed with her, but she slept. Like, she didn't have sex. She did not consummate a marriage last night. He just slept in a bed with her, which she's never done before.
Yeah, and we know her to be a widow. She has said that she is a widow, so obviously, and she's also implied that she did not have a happy marriage. So
yes,
we're learning more about her by the page.
Mm-hmm. She finds Locke shaving himself in the room, shirtless, and she looks up and is like, yummy. And he tells her there's a bath waiting for her. It'll just take a second to make it hot again. And she's like, well, are you coming back to bed? Because this marriage is not consummated yet. And he says, nope, sun's up. Missed my chance. That's our agreement. I get the night, you get the day. Sun's up now. Gotta go to work.
Yeah, and it's funny because we get Locke's thoughts, and he's basically like, I can't let myself have her all the time because she is like a siren to me. And so he like draws that line and says, no, I can only have her at night. But poor Portia is like, why doesn't he want me? And she's a bit desperate to consummate the marriage because she doesn't want him to be able to annul the marriage. And so she keeps trying that morning, but he's like, nope. So
yeah, and he has to go to the mines because the family owns a mine in the area. So he's like, got to go to the mines today. Got to check that out. And he also starts asking her questions about her former husband because she offers to tie his cravat. And she lies because there was no husband, but there was a Monty. We do not know who Monty is. One thing that she does before he leaves is she asks for her monthly allowance, which for him solidifies in his mind that she's just out for the bunny and is a title seeker and is not a kind person. So he gives it to her. And for her inner dialogue is just like, I need the safety net. If something goes wrong, I need money so that I can leave.
Yeah, she also goes on to kind of tell us, the reader, that she should have done that in the past. If she had done that in the past, she wouldn't be in the situation that she's in now. Yes. So we know that this is not driven by greed. This is driven by desperation.
Exactly. So Locke goes off to the mine, and Portia decides to go about the house and find a space for herself because she's sharing the room with Locke. She has not been given her own chambers, and she just wants a place where she can be her. So she battles the housekeeper for the keys. The housekeeper literally runs from her, yelling for the Marquess, and is like, she wants my keys. And Marsden backs her up and says to the housekeeper that she's the lady of the house and she has the right to the keys. So she begins exploring the house room by room, just looking for a place that can be hers. And she finds a music room that speaks to her immediately. Like, she can see it's got beautiful windows. It would have beautiful light. She's drawn to the pianoforte that's there. She apparently used to play, but it's been so long, and she loves to play the piano. The room is also dominated by a giant picture of the late Marchioness, but it's not in a negative way. She sees it as like she must have loved this room.
Yeah. I really loved her response to the painting and how she saw it with warmth and excitement and happiness and reverence, and not, fear or something negative.
Oh, look, there's the dead lady.
Yeah, or stress. It was really lovely.
Yes. So when Locke arrives home, and after he has a bath to wash the line off, the house, gotta bathe. All the baths, guys. All the baths. His housekeeper tells him that Portia stole her keys and hasn't been seen since. So he goes searching through the house and he finds her in the music room cleaning and stomping a spider in one of his boots. And he's very enchanted with the idea of her stomping spiders and her like cleaning and
her resourcefulness. He finds that really refreshing and he's charmed by her for sure.
And he in turn is charming because after the music room, he takes her to the Marchioness's study and gives her the Marchioness keys that have been sitting in the studies covered in dust. So she doesn't have to bother the housekeeper every day to get the keys.
Yeah. And she is surprised and, as we said, charmed by this gesture.
And so he then drags up the bathtub for her. Because once again, guys, gotta
take a bath.
Gotta bathe. And he thinks about staying in the room while she's bathing, but decides to leave because he'd rather not. And then once again, we get his sexual frustrations on a page.
I know. I like what you wrote. You wrote, there are a lot of pages dedicated to his sexual frustrations.
There are.
Okay, sorry. Moving on.
Yeah, so she's bathed and changed for dinner, and they meet in the library before dinner. She's expecting Marsden to come down, but Locke informs her that he really doesn't dine downstairs. He just takes his meals in his room. So it's just the two of them. And because it's just the two of them, there's some teasing. Because she's decided to only wear a corset under her dress.
Scandalous.
And he notices that immediately.
Yeah.
Because like I said, we've been reading lots of pages of his sexual frustration. So of course he's going to notice that she only has a corset on.
Yes. And when they do leave the room after some playful banter to go have dinner, she basically responds to his thoughts and says, I wouldn't have minded the desk. And I think it's important to note, because we haven't really called it out yet, and I think it's some of my favorite quotes later, I will, but Portia is really forward and really strong about her own sexual desires and her sexuality. And I think that's like, she's awesome in that regard. And so I just because we haven't called out any of her quotes yet or anything, I just don't want that to come off as, weird or incongruous with her character, because that's been her since literally the first scene.
Yes. And then when we come down to dinner, Locke is annoyed because the cook is insisting the meals be served in courses. As we mentioned, there's literally 3 servants, all of which have been there for 30 years and have risen through the ranks, and they're the only ones left. So the old butler is having to go back and forth from the kitchen to get the meals, and Locke's really annoyed that that's being done because he's a caring person. He doesn't want his aged butler wandering up and down the stairs with trays when he could just bring one up. And during dinner, they trade stories about she would love to hear the piano tune because she loved playing. And he tells her about the children wandering through the house at night because they used to steal the keys and wander the rooms, him and the other Hellions, trying to uncover the mysteries of the manor.
Ooh. So after dinner, then they say goodnight to Marsden on the way up, and they have a funny exchange so Marsden, we've also learned, is a bit forward and forthright with talking about sex. It's fantastically funny. And so...
Oh, there's a lot of hilarious moments in this book. Oh my gosh. Hilarious. Yeah. That would just make you blush a little bit if it was your dad telling you these things.
So in this moment, Marsden says he thinks that it'll take Locke 12 seconds to undo her laces, and Locke says, no, 8. So then Portia exits, and she's all, this is all in good fun, but she then later overhears Locke kind of telling his dad a little bit more forcefully about how he doesn't have to like her, he just has to bed her, those sort of things. And she's telling herself, that she doesn't mind this, but you can tell that as a character, she's a little bit put out because there is quite a spark of attraction between the two of them, even though they know what the deal is between their contract, shall we say. But she also hears Marsden ask Locke a business question, which is, how are things in the mine? And she is intrigued by the way that Locke answers. He really dismisses the question, says it's fine, no problems, and so she's immediately, her interest is piqued.
But that aside, the good news is our marriage gets consummated, guys. And we have our first encounter.
Woo.
And it's hot and heavy, and There's like clothes coming off and they don't even make it under the covers, guys.
No, this is all above the covers and forward and back and this way and that way.
Yes. And then after encounter number 1, you know, there's a moment of kindness between them and a moment of chatting and talking. And she's very intrigued because she's never really sat and chatted with a man after sex. However, this comes to an end because they get it consummated again and again before dawn. So, marriage is fully consummated, guys. And we think we got like 2 encounters, like 2.5 if you count the again before dawn.
Yeah, and I don't even know if like what are we supposed to like separate encounters by days? Is it by like sections? Like if they have an encounter and then do something else and then have an encounter again? Or does like, if it's 12 pages of multiple encounters in a row, does that count as one encounter because it's from sunup to sundown? Maybe we need to have some more rules, but guys, this book has a lot of them. And we weren't sure where one stopped and another started.
Nope, we're just going to keep counting, guys. But also too, after our encounters, there's some feelings of intimacy going on between the 2 characters. They're feeling a little bit more married in some ways. And it's kind of bringing up new feelings towards each other, not just a strict, I'm the wife, he beds me, she's my wife, I bed her, that sort of thing.
And it only gets kind of strengthened when the next morning Locke invites Portia to go to the village with him because he wants to place a notice in the local paper that they are looking for some servants.
Also that they got married, but...
Yeah, that too.
But really the gesture is the servants because she's surprised because they haven't. And he's like, yeah, I guess we could deal with some more. Like, I'm sure you want a maid. Also too, like, you're trying to clean that room. It'll be helpful. Mm-hmm. So while in the village, they go to the newspaper guy who Locke said, yeah, the placing the notice at this point is pointless because he's the biggest gossip in the town. So everyone will know before the paper's printed tomorrow. And that is true because they're approached by a girl who heard about the ad looking for servants and she's just applying to be a maid of all work. And Portia talks to her, kind of gets her references and tries to see where she fit. And Portia's like, I love your hair. You know, how about instead of being a maid of all work, you just actually come to work for me to be a lady's maid. And the girl protests and says, oh, I couldn't do that. And Portia's like, no, I'll teach you what you don't know. And Locke is very shocked and a little unhappy to see her being kind to someone who's applying to be a servant. This is a girl who's on hard time and Portia recognizes it, not only hires her, but promotes her all in the same time.
Yeah, because Locke, you know, has locked up his heart and he really wants to see Portia. He wants to see the side of Portia that is the woman who came through the door with her nose in the air and is haughty and aristocratic and looks down on people and is cold because that's the kind of woman he knows he can't love. So it's unsettling to him.
So while they're in the village, Locke surprises Portia more by taking her to not only talk to a piano tuner about coming and tuning the piano, they also go to a furniture maker because he says, I'm sure you need, because one thing she commented when they were sharing his room was that there was no place for her to get ready. And so he goes to find a piece of furniture for her to have as a vanity. And they go into the furniture maker and it turns out that Marsden had commissioned a vanity table be made for his wife, Linny, to celebrate the birth of their child, but because she died in childbirth, it was never delivered. And these furniture makers have kept it oiled and cleaned, and they've never sold it because it was already paid for, so they've just kept it until they came to get it. And it's beautiful. And so Locke says, we'll bring it home. Here's extra for the keeping of it for 30 years.
Yeah.
So for Portia, it's this beautiful monument, and it's also got a family connection. And seeing Locke be kind to the furniture makers, that goes a long way for her to just see him in a new light as well, as instead of just the arrogant husband, he's turning out to be a rather kind and charming fellow.
Which is also exactly what she didn't want, for reasons that we as the reader still don't quite understand.
Nope. But yeah, so Locke goes to the mines, and when he comes home, he finds Portia in the music room again, this time with all their new servants, cleaning, and he's very surprised to see her still in the midst of cleaning herself. Like, she's up personally dusting the portrait in the room, and he's sitting there thinking that she should be the one standing on the sidelines, pointing here and pointing there and saying, no, do it this way, do it that way. And at one point, she's on a ladder and actually tips over on the ladder, and one of the new footmen catches her. And Locke is really surprised by the spark of jealousy that comes his way. He does not like another man touching his wife.
Yes, he's definitely a bit possessive, shall we say.
Yes, and that night before dinner, Locke mentions the new servants to his father, and his father tells him how Portia actually already introduced them, and one of them seems like a bit of a handful, and Locke says, no, she has them all in line because she's really capable of being a friend one moment and the lady of the house the next. And his father says it sounds like he respects her a little bit. What do you know?
Yeah, interesting how that came about.
And a few days later, Locke gets home and is surprised to not find Portia in the music room. But the music room is now locked, and he's a little annoyed by that. He's like, is she in there and it's locked? Is she just cutting me out? What's happening? But Portia's there. She's already dressed for dinner. She says, I want to unveil it after dinner. And unveil it she does, and she sits down to play. And actually, it lures Marsden out of his room. So she had started to play the piano, and Locke really liked it and decided it'd be really fun to get under the piano and lift up her skirts and start satisfying her down there while she's playing. Which just gets real more awkward when Marsden actually is lured away from his bedroom and walks in on them.
And, oh my gosh, this is such a funny scene.
And his line is, I have a lot of great memories with your mother on that piano.
I think he even says, I think you were conceived on that piano.
Yeah.
And Locke is just such like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. He's like trying to, say that that wasn't what his father saw. So he was just trying to hear the chords better.
Yeah. And then Marsden comes and he's recalling happy memories, and this pattern continues every night. They sit down in the music room and Marsden joins them, and he tells Locke more about his mother than Locke's learned in the last 30 years.
And Locke is wondering, at this point, if maybe he did his father a disservice by never asking about his mother. But he had always thought that speaking about his mother upset his father, and so he was always worried about doing so.
And Marsden also mentions that Locke's mother would be happy to see the room righted, and he was wrong to leave everything shut up. So he's now giving Portia free reign over the house. Also, we should mention that evening, Locke and Portia have another busy night in the sheets.
They sure do. And sometime near this point in the book, Portia and Locke's relationship has progressed to the point where they are able to have more serious conversations. And she finally gets it out of him that the mine is no longer producing. And so he is going down into the mines every day to try to help find a new vein of tin. And when she finds this out, she is visibly upset. And so she tries to give her allowance back and says, no, I'll just take it when we've found a new vein. And Locke is, of course, ashamed and upset, and he doesn't know how to feel because now, of course, this is another moment of her not being a power hungry and money hungry title seeker. This is her being compassionate.
Yes, which also leads to a lot of frustration on his part. And then we finally do have sex on the desk.
Yes. Yeah. So now we have frustrated sex on the desk.
Mm-hmm.
And he rips her favorite dress. And it's his favorite dress.
Exactly. It's his favorite dress of hers.
So now we're just down a favorite dress, but we're up a steamy sex scene. So...
And then they move to the bedroom where they have more sex. So I think there's at least 2 or 3 in this one area, guys.
We're not trying to be, laissez-faire about it or say that they aren't good and steamy. It's just we lost count and we feel bad.
Yeah, no. And I mean, they're all hot and heavy, so there's really not much more to say. Anyway. And then after they have a light dinner in the room that evening, because like I said, they were so distracted by their sexual desire for each other that they just moved the hot desk sex to the bedroom and had more sex. Then they're, lounging, eating a light dinner in the room. And she talks a little bit more about her upbringing, and he learns that her father was very strict. And then they have an announcement from the servant that his father is waiting for them to join him at dinner. which is really awkward for them because they were a little busy and he has never yet joined them for dinner. So not only is he joining them every night in the music room, but now he's coming down to dinner. So they go and have second dinner.
Yes, you can always eat a little bit more, right?
Right.
So their days kind of fall into a pattern of her cleaning new rooms and him going down to the mines. And eventually they have a visit from the other Hellions. So we have the Earl of Grayling and the Duke of Ashbury who arrive for, I believe, only one night with their wives and children in tow. And Portia's really nervous for them, but the meeting goes swimmingly. Portia's really nervous for it, but everything goes beautifully until the morning after they arrive when Portia is ill. And Locke, when he hears the news, jumps up from the table. But the other wives, they know what's going on.
They know what type of sickness this is. Portia's pregnant.
Yes. So they've been together about a month now, and Portia is already pregnant.
Yes. Very possible with how much sex they're having.
Lots of sex. So it's spring and Portia is enjoying the gardens with Marsden.
This is about a month later after everybody's left.
Mm-hmm. And Marsden is so thrilled and excited that he's got an heir coming. And he's also really opened up and become a lot happier and animated since Portia's arrived and brought music and life back to the house. Obviously. Those are both great medicine. So they're having a lovely afternoon when it is ruined by an accident at the mine. They hear the alarm bells go off and Marsden and Portia hightail it in a carriage to the mine. So they arrive at the mine and there's all this tension, and she knows Locke was down there, and Marsden goes chasing off to see if he can help. And finally, someone emerges from the mine, and it is Locke, and Portia just can't stop herself. She is running towards him, and he then is running towards her, and he tells her that they found another vein of tin right before the collapse, and everybody got out safely, and all he could think of was her and the baby, and that's why he refused to panic when he was down there. And so he's really had kind of, this near-death experience, and it has definitely changed his mind about some things. He's not declaring his love for her quite yet, but he's definitely feeling a lot more open. And he's also decided that it's time to go to London and show her off.
Yes, and Portia is not happy to hear that.
No, she wanted to be a recluse at Havisham Hall, and going to London is the last place she wants to go.
Yes, because there's secrets in London that she cannot allow Locke to discover because she now realizes that she loves him and it would devastate him. So he can't find out.
Yeah, she's stuck between a rock and a hard place, and we, the reader, are stuck between Portia's hard place and a little bit of confusion because we still don't have the facts.
Yes. So they get to London and she's not really eager to go out, but Locke suggests she goes and gets some new dresses and because he ripped the one, and she's going to be going to a ball. And Locke goes over to the Twin Dragons, which is a popular place he used to frequent. And while he's there, he meets the Earl of Beaumont. They know each other from passing, and he comments on Locke's marriage. And Locke, talking about his marriage with Beaumont, realizes how much he misses Portia, so he goes home early. And Portia couldn't sleep because Locke wasn't there. And so she's kind of up in the house, kind of twiddling her thumbs, waiting for him to come home. And so he does. And they have another encounter. Mm-hmm. But this one's a little bit different. It's not our hot and heavy frustration. Grr. It's more emotional on both parts. They're really caring for each other. And so this encounter is more in that vein.
So then, after enjoying each other for a couple of days in London, it is time to go to their first ball. And they go and they have a lovely time, and Portia's doing beautifully. And at one point, Locke steps away and Portia is on her own after dancing with another man. And so she just goes out to the terrace to get a little bit of air. And she's feeling a bit relieved because most of the ball has occurred by this hour of the night. And she has not run into Monty, who is the man who she has mentioned a few times in her thoughts. And so she had kind of let her guard down when all of a sudden from behind her, she hears Monty. And this is where we, the reader, finally learn a little bit more information about her, which is that she was Monty's mistress.
And Monty is the Earl of Beaumont.
Yes. And Monty wants her back. He's upset and he says, you should come back to me. If you don't, he threatens to tell Locke everything, and he is doing everything in his power to get her back. And we get a little internal dialogue from her, which is that she was escaping from him. She doesn't want to go back to him. He's a danger to her. And luckily, Locke finds them.
Yes, he does find them in a rather compromising situation because Beaumont is forcing himself on Portia in the form of a kiss, which Locke heard Portia say no to. So Locke comes up and punches him right in the jaw. He grabs Portia and they're going to leave, and then Beaumont says, "You better count the months of that baby carefully."
Oh.
Dun, dun, dun.
It's so devastating in this moment.
So they get in the carriage and Locke says, "Is this baby mine?" And Portia tells him, "No, it is not." And then it is revealed that she was the mistress of the Earl of Beaumont.
Yes.
And he is furious and they fight.
I wouldn't say they even fight. I would say he is furious and shuts her down and doesn't let her say anything. And she pleads to please explain, but he is just too furious.
Yes.
To say anything.
Yes.
To let her say anything at this point.
Correct. And so instead he goes and drinks himself under the table.
Which we've read this a few times in books. In fact, this happened in The Duke and I. I'm just saying these things never go well.
No. And Portia, on her part, cries until she passes out on the floor. And so the next morning, Locke has announced to all the staff that they're returning to Havisham, and they kind of have it out in the morning, and he insults her for not bothering to mention she's pregnant of someone who was her protector for 2 years. And she rides in the carriage and he rides his horse back. And eventually, after like a very hard day of travel, he's like, okay, we better stop for the night. And he proceeds to get rip-roaring drunk again at the inn. Again. Amazing. And this time, though, he wanders up to Portia's room and he's still mad. But at this point, because he's been thinking about it all day, he finally wants to know how she ended up as a mistress, because that doesn't make sense with who he knows.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because his character, he has such a fight with himself. He's been fighting since the moment he met her to believe her something that she is not. And when he's finally felt like he understood who she is, he finds out that she's something that she's not, but that is incongruous with who he believes that she is. So he's fighting against himself back and forth, and he just finally realizes, I do have to hear what she has to say. So Portia tells her story.
Yes, and the story is that she was a vicar's daughter and the Earl of Beaumont came to town and pretty much just swept her off her feet. But this wasn't a quick thing. You know, he corresponded with her and visited with her for over a year and eventually convinced her to come to London. And his excuse was they couldn't marry beforehand because he had to convince his family that he should marry her even though she was a commoner. And so she follows him to London, and there's always this vague promise of marriage, and he sets her up in a house until he can get his family around. And then after a couple of years, she eventually finds herself pregnant and he still won't marry her. And he says, ugh, I'm not going to marry you. You're a commoner. I have to marry for prestige. And he says that, oh, don't worry, I'm going to farm the baby out. To which she learns from a friend of hers that when they farm a baby out, it doesn't mean the baby's going to go live on a farm. It means that the baby's going to die.
Which this is a common practice of the time and a really horrific piece of history.
It is. And it's also a very common theme in some of Lorraine Heath's books. She has a whole series kind of dedicated around it. So she fled to protect the baby, and she wasn't sure what she was going to do for the baby. And then she saw the notice of Marsden looking for a wife. And she figured that would be her best chance, because if she married an old man who already had an heir, the worst thing she would do is give him a spare, and it wouldn't be a child that inherits.
And he was a recluse who never was seen in society. She would be hidden away somewhere safe where she could raise her baby and live a better life than the one that she had had before.
Yes, and she also bears her soul to Locke and admits that she loves him, but Locke is also still drunk and still very hurt, so lashes out instead of really accepting it. And he pushes her and wants to have sex with her, and she loves him and she just agrees because she wants some form of him to pave the way towards a new beginning. But he passes out when he hits the bed. So there you go.
And I remember thinking in this moment, like, this is what the Daphne Simon scene like could have been. There were these moments of tension of like it almost happening. And then I was like, oh my gosh, is she going to take advantage of him in this state? And it's going to be the same scene. And it wasn't. It was just interesting, especially after reflecting on it so recently.
Yes.
So anyhow.
However, the next morning, Portia's gone. And actually, it's not even morning because Locke has slept till noon because he was so drunk the night before.
And she has covered her trail well, so it takes Locke a bit of time for him to find her.
He even goes to her parents' house and then punches her dad in the nose because he's actually a horrible human.
Yeah, her dad is really, really creepy man. Anyhow.
Anyway, so he actually tracks down the Earl of Beaumont because in Portia's telling, when she mentioned a friend talking about the baby, it was one of the other mistresses on Mistress Row. And so he actually goes to find Beaumont just to figure out where Portia used to live. And Beaumont's kind of smug because he says, haha, you couldn't hold on to her too. And there's another mistress there, so she won't be at that house. And Locke just tries to get the address. Eventually, he gives him the address. But what really is the kick, because Locke promised not to punch Beaumont again, except that then Beaumont proceeds to insult Locke's father. And so Locke punches him for that one.
This time he breaks his nose.
But that's okay, because Beaumont's not really that great a person.
Although Beaumont does admit that he did love Portia.
Yes.
And Locke tells him, well, you sure had a funny way of showing it.
Exactly. But this is how Locke finds Portia. She's at Sophie's house, which is actually her next door neighbor from Mistress Row. And he had to knock on a few random doors to find her, but he does find her. And Portia has been thinking it through and she says, we should just divorce or you can fake my death. And Locke says that he can't do that because he loves her. So there will be no divorce. And if the child is a boy, it'll be his heir and he will love the child because it is her child.
And because he also has a really heartbreaking line where he talks about watching his father raise 3 other boys that were not his own and treating them as though they were his. And why would he do any different? And it's just absolutely just pulls at all my heartstrings.
Yes. And so they go back to the Marsden house in London and they have love sex in the house. Yay. And then they finish the London season. So they end up just continuing through the season, and then they go home to Havisham, and Portia has the baby, which is a very heart-wrenching moment because Marsden at one point says she's going to die. It was the same with Linny, and Locke is terrified because she's going to die in childbirth, but luckily she doesn't, and she has a healthy baby girl, which is great. And in that moment, too, Locke says the child belongs to another, and Marsden says he suspected it because she was increasing a little too quickly for the timeline. But love matters more. So he left it.
Yes. And so then we get our lovely epilogue.
Yay!
Or should we say yay? Because this one's a little bit bittersweet.
Yeah, it actually is a little bittersweet. The good news is Portia's finally fixed up the whole house, and it's Christmas. And this is several years later. They now have 2 children. The second one is a boy, so Locke does have his heir. And the girl he loves with all his heart. And Marsden is the best of grandfathers. Just absolutely the best. However, they wake up on Christmas morning to the clocks ticking.
Oof.
And they've never done that.
And Locke knows. He knows something's different, not just the clocks.
Yes. And Marsden has gone out to the moors for the final time, and they find him at Linny's grave, and he is no more, and they see what looks like a kiss upon his cheek
in the snow,
knowing that he is now finally with his Linny.
Yeah, and they even know that, there isn't so much snow on him there, that the cold is the thing that took him, but rather it was his time. And it is a very bittersweet epilogue, but it is also really heartwarming. And I want to discuss it and the Marquess's novella.
Oh.
After the parlor. So shall we adjourn?
We shall adjourn. Let's go.
So today we'd like to tell you about a new resource for historical romance lovers, and this is Historical Romance Magazine. And it is a reader-facing quarterly magazine that features articles, columns by literary experts, author interviews, book reviews, and a short story in every issue.
While it's strictly historical, Historical Romance Magazine aims to please readers from inspirational to spicy.
And I think we all get that. Like, we are here talking about historicals
Yay!
all the time. And we read books that are, a little bit inspirational and also, like this one, a little bit spicy.
Yes, and the digital premiere issue is available for free. So all you have to do is go to historicalromancemagazine.com and you can get yourself one of those.
And in that premiere issue, they had exclusive interviews with Eloisa James. I bet you all have heard of her before. And Roseanne Bittner. And coming up in the next one is Beverly Jenkins and also Lauren of the American Duchess Company. Do you know what American Duchess is, Kelsey?
I have no idea.
So it's a really cool, like, historical clothing company that does these really cool shoes and I think dresses too. I really hope I'm not mixing that up with another company, but they definitely do shoes and they're super cool and you should check them out on Instagram. But you should also check out Historical Romance Magazine on Instagram too, because that's going to have all your details there.
That's pretty dang awesome. Also, if you want to see a physical magazine, then you can go ahead and subscribe to their print magazine, which they're hoping to get started soon.
Yeah, they need 100 subscribers who would like to have it in print by December 25th to make that happen. So if you're interested in holding it in your hands rather than looking at a digital copy, then head on over to that website and become one of their patrons. So their website, one more time, is historicalromancemagazine.com. Pretty easy to remember. And we'll also have a link in our show notes so that you can get yourself a copy.
We'd also like to thank the listeners who have reached out to us so far. We absolutely love hearing from you guys and appreciate all the feedback. As you heard, we were reading some of the letters we got today, and we love having the discussions and being able to interact with you guys. So thank you so much that you love what we're putting out because we love making it.
We really do. And I just want to say to everyone, we do read and respond to every one of your emails and messages on Instagram, and we are also keeping track of all your recommendations on a spreadsheet. So thank you guys. It really means a lot that you guys reach out and say hi. So keep doing it.
Yes, Zoe loves the actually, so keep it us. And if you have one for us, you can email us at romancepod@gmail.com. And as we said, we'd love to hear from you. We love our book recommendations, which we often give to you guys. And you guys can also recommend questions you'd like to hear us answer at the top of the show. Feedback, anything else you guys want to talk to us about. We're happy to get it, so you can totally email us.
And if you want us anywhere else, we're on Instagram at Tea and Strumpets, Facebook /Tea and Strumpets, and YouTube, which is not /Tea and Strumpets. But if you search Tea and Strumpets podcast, you'll find us. And sign up for email updates on our website, romancepod.com.
And if you love what we're making, please rate, review, and subscribe because that's really the best for us. You can also find us everywhere you get podcasts, and we're also at frolic.media/podcasts.
Yeah, so I know we announced it last week, but we're part of the Frolic Podcast Network, which is a network dedicated to bringing your ears the best in romance. So a fellow network podcast, Too Stupid to Live, coined it an audio-based love fest, and I really love that. I really wish I had said that, but so I have to say it because it's the cutest way to describe it. So if you want to learn more about the Frolic Podcast Network, you can visit that link that Kelsey mentioned a minute ago, and we're going to drop that also in our show notes. And while you're there, you can check out other great podcasts like Smart Podcast Trashy Books from Sarah Wendell and Jeff and Will's Big Gay Fiction podcast. And if you didn't know this, Smart Podcast Trashy Books and Jeff and Will's Big Gay Fiction podcast were both recently featured in Oprah magazine. So pretty legit right there. And they're going to be alongside tons of other great podcasts. There's also Learning the Tropes. If you guys haven't listened to that one, that's where Aaron, a romance veteran, and Clay, a romance virgin, review all sorts of romance books. So if you're all caught up on us, head on over there and listen to some of the others.
Yes, go ahead and listen.
All right. Whew, we made it to picking it apart.
We did. Thank goodness. Okay.
All right, Kelsey. So this is interesting because a lot of the time we've both read this book or we've talked about this book and our opinions of it a little bit before, but you and I haven't talked about our opinions of this book yet. And except for really talking about it, I've sort of gotten a flavor of your opinions through the synopsis. But what did you think about this book?
I liked it enough. I thought there's definitely some intrigue, and I really, I really like Lorraine Heath as an author. I've read a ton of her books, which was why I thought I had read this one. But, I liked a lot of Portia's dialogue and her internal dialogue. Lorraine Heath writes beautiful sex scenes. Mm-hmm. Just beautiful. And they really keep the story moving. And she is not afraid to put plenty in a book.
Yes.
So if you're looking for steaminess ratings, Lorraine Heath's got your back.
Definitely. So I pretty much agree. I thought it was good enough too. I remembered this book, and I actually I put it out in the airwaves when I was trying to think of a spooky book. I was like, there's one with a deserted castle and a ghost, and it was his dead wife. And I was like, and you know what? Honestly, within 5 minutes, you guys on Instagram answered my calls and you knew what this was, plus like 5 others that were very similar. So then it made it difficult picking our spooky book. And I do think that this book actually, for a Regency, fit that spooky, but also still totally, it's not a Regency, but totally historical, right? And within the time period, because how can you find something that's spooky but isn't paranormal, right?
Yeah.
And maybe next year we'll branch out a little bit. Who knows? So I was pleasantly happy with that. It definitely felt like the right season. Now, I thought this book was just kind of fine. I thought it had a lot of superfluous stuff. Maybe there was a couple extra baths.
There was a lot of talk of sexual frustrations at the beginning.
There was a lot of sexual frustrations, and some of it was fun, and then it just felt a little bit repetitive. And then the other thing that felt kind of was a frustration point for me was we didn't know about Portia's secret for too long. And I was fine with the reveal, and I was fine that he came around quickly, but it was like we were waiting for this big ball to drop, and then we kind of thought it had already dropped, and then it dropped later, and then he came around so fast that there was just something disjointed a little bit about the plot for me. I still enjoyed reading the book.
It was a good read. It just wrapped up too quickly.
Yeah, which at that point though, as a reader, I was happy for that because it had dragged a little bit in places. So I was glad that it didn't drag, but at the same time I was also like, it wasn't in my top books. I don't know how to.
Yeah, that's fine. I think Marsden was probably my favorite character.
Oh, he was delightful. And the dialogue was great. There was some witty banter.
No, there definitely was. Dialogue was good.
I think it was just the plot in general. It needed a little bit of editing, I think, to make it a little bit snappier.
Well, and the secret, like you said, it just kind of dragged, and you thought it was going to come, and then it didn't come, and then, the whole mine thing happened, and you thought that was going to be a bigger deal, and that wasn't even that big a deal.
They just found the tin.
He comes out of it after 2 minutes and is like, we're fine.
I think maybe she realized that she loved him in that moment, but I expected him to realize that he loved her, but he still was pushing it away from him. So, yeah. But anyhow, so speaking of our Viscount Killian St. John, Viscount Locksley, Robin of Locksley. Sorry, I just can't. I can't think about Locksley without thinking of Robin of Locksley. So, but what would you rate our hero?
I would rate our hero a 5.
Whoa! I'm so surprised. Okay, tell me more.
Yeah, he just I get him being an ass and I get him never wanting love, but he just he would just fought everything for too long, and it just seemed disjointed with how kind and caring he actually could be. And frankly, it just was I'm glad he came around quickly to loving her and not caring about the child, but I just I don't know, he was fine. He's just gonna get a medium.
Wow. Okay. So I would rate him higher than you. I'd rate him a 6 for pretty much, and I was like maybe going to rate him a 6.5, but like now I'm sticking to a 6. You've emboldened me. I thought he was similar to the book. He was a bit disjointed. His personality, he had these kind of back and forth, like whiplashy moments of, right, him fighting against himself and saying like, I can't love her. I must lock my heart away. And then being like really mushy. And I loved the mushiness. And I loved when he was smart and stopped listening to the stupid parts of his brain, you know?
Yeah.
I loved that part of him, but there were moments too where he was like trying to be an asshole, or he was being, he like had very alpha characteristics, and it just like, it almost just didn't feel like it fit him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, exactly. But that's what I mean is like, he really was this like kind-hearted softie, but like even his big, tough, like arrogant exterior didn't really like hold up. Like it just never held up, and it didn't even held up like, because you get alpha heroes that are kind and caring, but like their alphaness carries over to the kind and caring.
I feel like if he had been aloof and people had just mistaken that aloofness for being kind of cold or icy or something, I don't know, maybe a little similar to Simon, right, in like the Bridgertons, maybe that would have been a better character choice for him rather than him trying to be so domineering in the beginning, because it kind of drifts off. It doesn't happen later. Like he just kind of, he gives that up too quickly too. Yeah. So it's just, yeah, I feel like he's a 6.
Fair. What about Portia? What do you think of her?
Oof. Oh my God. I don't know. I should have known this was coming. I totally had my rating.
This is usually how we do it, Zoe.
I know. It's how we do it every time. I think she's also a 6. I think like, I'm not mad at her. I totally, you know what? I think she's a 6.5, because I think that her decisions and everything that she did was totally justified. And she was really, I think it was really interesting that she was stuck between, you know, this hard place of like, oh, I don't want to marry this guy. This is the least thing I want to do. I had this plan, and she was afraid to marry Locke in the beginning because she didn't want to give him a bastard. But then he was a bastard to her, and she was like, fuck it. Like, this is, I either have this or nothing, and I can't take nothing. I've come too far to take nothing.
Exactly.
And so I wasn't mad at her when I found out. I felt pity and frustration because it sucked. The situation sucked. And I was okay with it sucking, right? I just also, I feel like she also had great lines and great dialogue and banter, but I also just like, I just didn't love her that much.
Fair. That's why for me, she's a 5.5. She's slightly better than him. But she's better than him just simply because like, I felt like you said, I'm not mad at her. I felt all her actions were justified in that sense. Like, I'm not mad at that. I do like her wit and her banter, and I think that she, you know, can be a strong woman, which is why she gets the 0.5. But for me, anytime it's like all secrets and all this, I get so just over it.
I know. And I wonder if that's why like you and I really don't identify with this book, and we don't like it, is because you and I both really don't like the secrets plot. And again, we've read some where secrets can further it, and similar to, you know, Courtney Milan's novellas. And I was thinking about all of Courtney Milan's books. Courtney does secrets right. This one just felt like, you know, a terrible decision no matter what. Like it could be so bad. And then the fact that the child was a girl was like this relief that also felt cheap, because you've had this build up to that point, right? Of like, you know what, it doesn't matter. And so you kind of feel like maybe they're going to continue weathering this difficult thing. And I don't know. It was like a relief, but also like, is that the easy way out? Do you know what I mean?
No, I do. And you know me, I'm always like, oh, look, people having an honest conversation in one of these books. I hate the secret plot. I hate when it's held on. I hate when people don't give each other the full story. Like, I understand that at some points you need to just to further the plot along. I get that. But in this, it's like you got a little bit and then you got nothing. And then you got a little bit and then you got nothing. And then eventually you got the whole thing. And then it was like drama, catastrophe, wrapped in a pretty bow, happy ending.
Yeah. So We did say, though, that they had a lot of great banter and a lot of great dialogue. So did you have a favorite quote or?
Oh, I have an absolute favorite.
All right.
It's a bit of a passage, not just a quote.
So is mine.
So mine is from Marsden actually says it. And he's talking to Locke and they're discussing Portia. It's pretty early on in the book. And Locke says, "A man doesn't flirt with his wife." His father looked at him as though he'd caught him doing something he shouldn't. "Don't be a fool, boy. Of course he does." And then Locke responds, "He's obtained her. What's the point?" "The point is to make her eyes sparkle like the rarest of jewels, to bring color to her cheeks, to cause the corners of her mouth to turn up ever so slightly, to let her know she is appreciated, still regarded as special, worth the effort. To give her cause to fall a little bit more in love. I flirted with your mother until the day she died." He lifted a slender shoulder, rounded with age. "Still do from time to time."
Oh, it's so sweet. Well, I am going to spice things up a little bit with my quote.
Okay.
So this is earlier in the book. This is when Portia first has come into the manor, and it is literally the first interaction between Locke, Portia, and Marsden. So Locke begins this passage. Leaning forward, he dug his elbows into his thighs. "I'm simply striving to determine why a woman as young and lovely as yourself would be willing to lie on her back so a man as shriveled as my father can slide on top of her." "Locke," his father bellowed, "you've gone too far. Get the hell out." "It's quite all right, my lord," she said calmly, never taking her challenging gaze from Locke's, not flinching, not blushing, not so much as arching a thinly shaped eyebrow at him. "I don't see that your father's preferred position for coupling is really any of your concern. Perhaps he will take me standing while coming in at me from behind, or on my knees, or upside down. But I assure you, he will not be shriveled."
That is a good one. I love that. And I also like that line simply because, later on, I think in the epilogue, she goes to Locke and she says, "I still haven't told you how you take me upside down."
I know. It's very cute. And that's our first introduction to her. She's like tit for tat with them. There's the two men who are like, trying to take control, and she just doesn't let it happen. So I really liked that one.
Mm-hmm. I agree. That was a good one.
So we've already talked about how steamy this book was, but what would we rate it?
It was definitely on the slightly hot to touch scale.
Yeah, and there was a lot of it. But to be honest, I felt like a little full, like I couldn't really drink anymore. Like there were parts where I just kind of skipped ahead and it's not because the sex scenes were badly written. They were beautifully done, but it was more like
so many.
So many. And also that there was this secret and I just really needed to know what the fuck was going to happen. And
Fair.
The sex at that point, it was just in the way of just me as a reader. I felt anxious. What is going to happen here?
I kind of started to read them quicker and not paying attention as close to them. Like you said, not because they're not willing. Lorraine Heath writes beautiful scenes. She always has. But eventually it just became too much. And I was like, okay, but what's happening with this? Can we just keep going, please?
Yeah, it just wasn't. It again, like we kind of talked about with maybe the plot needing a little editing or something. It just didn't feel like it needed to be there. It wasn't like they were having sex on a museum bed. There was a place and a time, but it was I didn't need to hear about it at that moment. So anyhow, and we already kind of alluded to this, but our encounter counter is a 6+. This is our most encounters so far. And I feel bad, kind of giving, it talking that we're frustrated with how many encounters there are just because it's the one that we've had the most. But I think that has a lot to do with the plot and not to do with the actual encounters. It's not like we were tired of them specifically. It just felt like we had other things to learn.
Yes, there was quite a lot more going on. And it was, we like the sex because it furthers the plot. Mm-hmm. And at some point it didn't seem to continue to further the plot. It was just included in there.
Yeah.
All right. So, but talking about all this sexy talk and also how witty our heroine is, how feminist do you think this book is?
So I kind of wrestle with this one in a weird way because I feel like it's almost neutral because I don't think the book is the strongest work we've ever seen. But I definitely if I'm really thinking about it critically, I think it's neutral plus. It's a little bit of a supporter. There's a lot first of all, her being so strong about her sexuality is fantastic. Her doing everything that she can in a world full of terrible men to support herself and her child. I think that is a really strong vision.
I think too, as far as, you know, in line with Neutral Plus, I think that the thing is Portia's other conversations with other women are all very positive. You know, she, even when she's just talking to the lady's maid, you know, she's lifting her up in the world. She's talking to the Duchess and the Countess, and, you know, they're helping Portia out. They're like, welcome to the family. She figured out about the whole baby thing, and the reason she was able to get away from Monty was because of Sophie, the other mistress in the situation.
Absolutely.
There was like definitely in the sense of like, all the female relationships we saw were definitely all positive and helpful, and they were not in any way, shape, or form degrading.
You're totally right. I up my rating to supporter. In fact, I have another quote where they're arguing with each other, and Locke says, "You married me thinking I would force myself on you," and Portia replies, "I married you knowing that women have very little say in how they are treated." And I think calling out things like that in the time period is also very feminist, right? Knowing that.
I will say that too.
Yeah. So
I think we've actually upped ourselves from neutral to supporter.
We definitely have. Oh, goodness. But I did also allude that there is a novella about the Marquess. And so I don't know if, I know Kelsey doesn't know this, but listeners, if you didn't know this as well, there is a novella, and it is about his love story with Linny. And that's kind of an interesting thing because you know that they don't really get much of a happily ever after, do they? They get a few years together. And I have read this novella, and I do recommend it. It is definitely one of the more bittersweet ones. And I'm going to also spoil the epilogue of the novella, but I think that it is poignant for our discussion because the epilogue of the novella has a detailed scene of that Christmas morning from the Marquess's perspective.
Well, that's adorable.
And he does get to see Linny again. It definitely brings tears to your eyes. And you also get him turning the clocks back on and all of his thoughts about leaving his lovely family, but about how it's his time. And it's such a different take. And I think it's kind of brave of Lorraine Heath to have written that novella. So, because it is a little bit detached from what we expect of our romance novels, but I don't know. I really liked that one, but
I might have to pick that up because I really did love Marsden as a character.
Yeah, he's pretty great. So we have one last thing to do with this book, which is to give our book the final ratings. So what would you rate this book, Kelsey?
Like a 5.5. I'm going to stick with my scale here.
I would rate it a 6.5. I think that is with my scale as well. I think that a 7 is a great book, you know. An 8 is an excellent book, and higher we can talk more. You've heard us talk about it. I think this book is a good book. It's not my favorite book, but I think that it's like well written. There's funny dialogue. There's some strong moments of the characters, but it just doesn't quite resonate with me. So somewhere between fine and good.
That's fair. And I think that's why for me, it's just a 5.5. Like I didn't dislike it. Like there are moments of it I really liked and I really enjoyed, and characters I really was happy with. But for me, it's one of those, it's like, it's a book, I read it, and now I'm moving on.
Well, you can't win them all. And we are going to be reading something else next week. So Kelsey, do you want to tell us what we're reading next time?
Yes. Well, next time is actually a little different.
What?
Because the next time you hear from us, we have an interview with debut author Evie Dunmore. And so we're going to talk about her book, Bringing Down the Duke.
Yeah, I can't wait. So read up and listen in. We're going to do a real brief synopsis of the book before getting into the interview, but we are going to talk a lot about the book too and the writing process. So I hope you all are as excited to listen as we are to talk with her.
Yes, and while reading is not necessarily required, it is a little helpful, but we're also really getting into just more what it's like to be a new author on the scene and how she got her start and how this book came about.
Yeah, I can't wait. So in the meantime, if you guys would like to leave a rating, a review, that would be great. Or tell someone about this podcast. That's another way to help people find us.
Yes.
So thank you all for listening. Join us next time for our interview with Evie Dunmore.
And may all your ever afters end happily.
Locke awoke to see the barest hint of dawn easing in through the windows. He could see the gently falling snow. The children would be delighted. His father would no doubt take them outside to build a snowman. Suddenly, he became aware of two things. The howling wind was not the high-pitched shrieking he was accustomed to, which was odd, as it was always worse in winter, and a ticking clock. Alarmed, he shot straight up in bed, threw back the covers, and rolled to his feet, crossing over to the mantel. The time showed 20 minutes past 7. "What is it?" Portia asked sleepily. "The clock is ticking, and the time—" He looked toward the window. The time could be accurate. He crossed the room, snatched up his clothes from the floor, and began to don them. "Killian, what's going on?" "Go back to sleep. I just need to check on something." "Your father." He stilled. Deep down in his heart, he knew what he was going to find. "Something's not right. I'll come with you." He wanted to argue with her, urge her to stay in bed where it was toasty warm, but if he was correct, he was going to need her. When they were both dressed, they went down the hallway to his father's room. The door was open, the room empty. "I think he's gone to her," he said quietly. "He could be downstairs playing Father Christmas." He shook his head. "No, he's gone to her for the last time. That's why the clocks are ticking. He started them up before he left." They went down the stairs. In the foyer, the grandfather clock gonged the half-hour. Taking Portia's hand, he led her outside. The wind and the falling snow whipped around them as they trudged towards the ancient oak tree and his mother's grave. And there was his father, lying prone over the mound of earth, one hand resting against the headstone as though he'd been caressing it. He was covered in a light dusting of snow. He hadn't been there long, not long enough for the cold to have done him in. "I think his heart gave out." "Do you think he knew it was time?" she asked softly. "Was his starting up the clocks a parting gift to us?" "Perhaps." She knelt beside him and leaned against his shoulder. "I'm so sorry. I know this is hard, no matter a person's age." She tightened her grip on his arm. "Killian, look at his cheek. It looks as though he was kissed by an angel." On his father's cheek there was a spot where the snow was not quite as thick, a spot whose shape very much resembled the outline of a mouth. "It's a paw print. There are no others on him or around him. I think it's as he's always said. Your mother was waiting for him." Ghosts don't exist, although he couldn't deny that the wind was quieter than he'd ever heard it. Turning to her, he wanted to believe in a love that strong, a love that could transcend death. Out of the corner of his eye, a movement caught his attention, a shadowy image, two people holding each other close, walking away. Only when he looked squarely in that direction, he saw nothing at all. No distinct shadows, no footprints. "What is it, Killian?" Portia asked softly. It wasn't possible. Ghosts didn't exist. They were merely figments created by grief, a profound grief that was now washing through him, that had washed through his father for years. Portia closed her arms around him, and they rocked while the wind wailed and the snow fell, and at the residence the clocks ticked. Tea and Strumpets is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts.